must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for watching us. This is another edition of Diaspora Dispatches, where now we get to look at the news-making headlines across Africa. And so before we do that, perhaps we go through some of the figures, COVID-19 statistics as they stand right now across Africa. And we start with Kenya, where the confirmed cases is at 3,094. 89 people have died, 1,048 others have recovered there. So we see the number of people who have recovered there have gone up, and that is a good thing. And Uganda, the cases right now is at 665. Recoveries is at 119. And Zimbabwe, we have confirmed cases there, 320. 4 people have died, and recoveries there is 49. South Sudan, also the cases haven't changed, 1,604. 19 people have died, recoveries is at 15. And Sudan, 6,589 cases. The death toll there is 401. Recoveries is 2,202. And Ethiopia, 2,506 cases. 35 people have died. Recoveries is 401. And Madagascar, there the numbers continue to go up, with now confirmed cases standing at 1,138. 9 people have died. 274 others have recovered. And we go to Rwanda, where the cases right now is at 476. 2 people have died. 307 others have recovered, and as I mentioned there earlier, I think the recovery rate there in Rwanda is quite commendable because they have 476 cases. 307 of those have recovered, so that's good. And unfortunately, they have 2 deaths there. And South Africa, 55,421 cases have been recorded so far. 1,210 people have died. Recoveries is at 31,505. And we move to Egypt, where confirmed cases is at 38,284. The death toll is 1,342, and recoveries is 10,289. And then we go to Nigeria, 13,873 cases. The death toll there is 382. Recoveries is 4,351. And Ghana, 10,201 cases, 48 deaths. I think the same number as yesterday. Recoveries there is 3,755. Algeria, 10,484 cases. 732 people have died, and 7,074 have recovered. And Tunisia, 1,087 cases, 49 deaths, and 983 recoveries there, and kudos to Tunisia. And in Botswana, 48 cases so far. 1 person has died, and 24 others have been able to recover there. So the total cases in the continent right now is about 208,855. The number of deaths in the continent is 5,658, and recoveries is 95,111. And the global statistics, and I'm sure these have changed because I prepared this a bit a while ago, earlier, mid-morning there, at 7,458,921, and the global deaths right now stands at 419, and 20, and recoveries is 3.7 plus million there. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching, Dominic Nwandu and also Musa Marenan. Please let me know where you're watching us from this day, so we get into the African news today. And of course, we start with Burundi. And Denise Nkurunziza, the widow of Burundi's late president, returned home from receiving medical treatment in Kenya hours after the announcement of her husband's death. The BBC has learnt on Tuesday afternoon the government announced that President Pierre Nkurunziza had died aged 55 after suffering a cardiac arrest. An official in the Burundian president's office denied that Mrs. Nkurunziza, who was airlifted to the Kenyan capital Nairobi on the 28th of May, had been treated for coronavirus. Come on, people. So now, she was discharged on Tuesday. An official at the private Kenyan hospital where she was staying told the BBC without giving details about her condition. And a journalist in Burundi's main capital, Bujumbura, confirmed to the BBC that Mrs. Nkurunziza had arrived home on Tuesday evening. Now, Mrs. Nkurunziza, a mother of 5 and former immigration officer, is known in Burundi for her philanthropic work through her foundation called Buntu. And we go to Zimbabwe, and police in Zimbabwe have charged an opposition member of parliament and 2 activists with lying about being tortured in custody. The 3 women, Joanna Mamombe, Cecilia Chimbiri, and Netsia Marova, had been arrested and charged over the participation in a protest rally in May. The women alleged that police had subjected at least one of them to serious sexual violence and were admitted to hospital with various injuries. And then we go to Nigeria, where the death toll from an attack carried out by suspected Islamist jihadists in northeastern Nigeria has risen to 69, making it one of the biggest attacks targeting civilians this year. Its timing is significant, as in recent weeks, the army has released statements claiming significant success against the Boko Haram militants. The reality is that there are frequent attacks in northern Nigeria and neighboring Niger, Cameroon, and Chad. In March, 92 Chadian soldiers were killed by Boko Haram insurgents in what Chad's president said was the jihadist deadliest attack against the country's army. 2 days earlier, 47 Nigerian soldiers were killed in Boko Haram ambush. All right, and when you hear President Buhari coming out and saying they have Boko Haram under control, you wonder where? All right, and we move to Ethiopia, where Ethiopia's upper house of parliament has agreed to extend the prime minister and government's term in office beyond October because elections have been delayed. Polls were due to be held in August, the first since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018, but officials have postponed them because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the country's 9 regional governments have also had their terms extended in a binding ruling by the House of Federation. It suggests that after the pandemic was no longer considered a threat to the public, elections will be held within 9 months to a year. And we go to Sudan, where police have fired tear gas to disperse demonstrators in Sudan. Police fired tear gas, that was yesterday, to disperse, demonstrators in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, protesting against a new United Nations mission for the country. The protesters who gathered near army headquarters accused the government of bringing in occupiers. They chanted, "Down with the government of informants." And of course, last week, the UN Secretary Council approved the Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, whose mandate is to support the country's passage to civil rule. Sudan is a 3-year transition period with power shared between civilians and the military following the ousting last year of the long-serving president Omar al-Bashir. And this is a story that we shall look at. Rebecca, a very good afternoon to you. Musa, Marena, a very good afternoon to you. The rest of you, thank you so much for watching. Just keep writing to me. Once I'm through with this, maybe 3 or 4 other items remaining, we shall start talking, especially the Sudan matter and the attacks in Nigeria. We go to Zambia, where the Zambian Catholic bishops say many people are afraid of speaking out against the government's brutality, intimidation, and threats by those in authority. The privately owned Lusaka Times website is now reporting. Now, the head of the Conference of Catholic Bishops, George Lungo, is quoted as saying that people can no longer even criticize political party officials. Last week, Lusaka Province Minister Bowman Lusambo gave some artists a 24-hour ultimatum to apologize to President Edgar Lungu for critical comments about government corruption. Now, one of them apologized, while two others refused to comply. The bishops have also called on Zambian Member of Parliament to withdraw a contentious constitution amendment bill that proposes changes in the electoral system and revises the composition of a cabinet. So you cannot even criticize Edgar Lungu there in Zambia if you attempt. I think the same thing in Rwanda. You cannot even draw a cartoon, even as that you can. There's no satire in Rwanda. If you do that, then you will be happy to spend 7 years of your life in jail there. That is the minimum. Yeah. And we go to Chad, where Malawi's Electoral Commission has set 23rd of June as the date for fresh presidential election after we go to Malawi, not Chad, but Malawi, after President Peter Mutharika re-election last year was nullified by the court. The Constitutional Court had in February ordered a fresh presidential election be held within 150 days, a ruling upheld by the Supreme Court. A statement from the Commission's newly appointed chairperson, Justice Chifundo Kachale, said the date was set by the members of parliament in compliance with the Supreme Court's order. Now, Kachale warned of logistical challenges, but said they will consult presidential candidates to explore reasonable mitigation measures in delivering a credible election. And may I just add that Justice Chifundo Kachale, the now chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission, was appointed by President Peter Mutharika, whose win was challenged in court. And of course, his win, last year's win in May, was nullified in this year, I think the 3rd of February there. So he appointed this person. So I'll be looking to see a free and fair election there in Malawi, or Malawians will be subjected to another court petition and another nullification. We don't know, but I don't know what you expect there. You can tell me your opinion and let me know what you think of that. We go to Libya, where the United Nations has said Libya's warring sides are fully engaged in a military talk aimed at ending the fighting in the country, calling virtual meetings productive. The UN support mission in Libya said on Wednesday that it had convened a meeting with a delegation from renegade military commander Khalifa Haftar's eastern-based forces on June 3rd, and another on Tuesday with a delegation from the internationally recognized Government of National Accord in Tripoli. And then we move to South Sudan, and South Sudan has slightly improved as the least peaceful country in the world after coming fourth in the Global Peace Index. The report released yesterday ranked South Sudan's state of peace in the very low category. Afghanistan remains the least peaceful country, and a position it has held for 2 years, followed by Syria, Iraq, and then South Sudan. This is a small improvement from last year, where South Sudan retained the position of the least peaceful country in the East African region after Burundi. Okay, so South Sudan, it came after Burundi as the least peaceful country in East Africa. That was last year. So Burundi, things are not very good there. And that is what I was saying here yesterday. As much as in African culture, you cannot really criticize the dead, but I respect Nkurunziza as a father, husband, all of that. And our condolences to the family there and the people of Burundi. But when you look at his track record as a president, what the legacy that he left in Burundi is quite mixed there, and there's no reason why Burundi should be the least peaceful country in the world, but it was, and then followed by South Sudan. But that has improved for South Sudan. This year South Sudan was at number 160 out of 163 countries ranked. The 14th edition of the annual Global Peace Index reveals that in 2020 the average level of global peacefulness deteriorated for the 9th time in 12 years. And I think COVID-19 it has messed our peace. I don't know what they use to make these rankings. I will be interested to see, and also look and see how peaceful we are here in Kenya. I'll go look for that that report and see how we fare here in Kenya in terms of how peaceful we are in this wonderful country. So we end with Tunisia, where Tunisia's parliament has rejected a motion calling on France to apologize for crimes committed during and after colonial rule, following 15 hours of debate. The bill, which demanded compensation to the Tunisian state to all those who suffered the pain of colonialization, was put forward by the centrist Al-Karama coalition, which holds 19 of the 217 seats there in Tunisian parliament. Now, legislators from the bloc attended the session, which ran into the night wearing T-shirts bearing the slogan "Murder and Torture, the Brutality of French Colonialism." 77 votes were cast on Wednesday in favor of the motion, far short of the 109 votes needed for it to pass a tall order, given the deep divisions among members of Tunisia's parliament. Now, this is what one of them was quoted as saying: "We are not animated by any bitterness or hatred, but such apologies will heal the wounds of the past." So what a section of Tunisian, a member of parliament, are saying: we need an apology from France about the human rights abuse that were committed in this country, about the forceful, being taken away and slavery and all that. So we need all of these things that happened during when France was the colonialist power there in Tunisia. We need an apology. The fact that we moved on and now we have a good working and diplomacy relationship cannot forgo the fact that our forefathers suffered in this country. And we've seen such cases even here in Kenya, the Mau Mau and such. They've gone to the British government and they've been having cases there to try to get compensation and all that, and just to have themselves heard. So what a section of members of parliament there in Tunisia is saying: hey, we need an apology. We don't even want their money. We don't even want them to do anything for us, but we want them to acknowledge that they put us through a very difficult time as a country. Our forefathers went through losses and human rights abuses in this country when France was our colonialist. And that was like about just 77 members of parliament that supported that motion. So what really shocked me, young people will say shook, but what really shocked me in this regard is the majority of lawmakers in Tunisia feels this apology, they don't need it. They're okay, because you know why? They say the lawmakers from the bloc attended the session, so they said that the outcry, he attacked the outcry. What did he say? He said that this will affect. Opponents argued that such a move would spell economic disaster, given that France is Tunisia's top trade partner and foreign investor. Some 1 million Tunisians also live in France. So the leader of the moderate Islamist party, Ennahda, was among those who say the motion could harm Tunisia's economic interest and its most important international alliance. Others noted Tunisia's years-long economic crisis and 15% unemployment rate and said the motion was too hastily prepared. So they're saying, we can do without France's apology because we start to gain more, from France as it is right now. So if we keep demanding for an apology for how they treated us, then, this might affect where we are today economically. And it's just mixed feelings for me, because they're not asking for anything more. And of course, the leadership of France that is today, they're not the ones responsible for, what happened those years that, France or French was the, Tunisian colonist. So I don't know why a majority of our politicians that are in Tunisia would not feel it is important for France to come and apologize for the atrocities it committed during colonial period and even after, that it committed in Tunisia. I don't know why they wouldn't want that. They just want an apology. They just want France to take responsibility of its part on what Tunisia is today and the lack of. Well, Tunisia is a bit developed compared to other African countries, but, it has been suppressed even those days. And, how much they pay, the countries that are colonized by France, they still have when French was leaving, you had an agreement with them. So they really never left. Go look for that. So they're saying, hey, we need an apology here. But a majority of them are saying, no, we don't. Because if we insist on getting this, then we stand to lose. Because right now, France is Tunisia's top trade partner and foreign exchange. And that's why, every time we argue about Africa independence, it's a mixed bags of everything and anything, because on one side we want to come out and say we're happy, we're proud, we're independent African states, but on the other hand, are we truly independent if we cannot stand up and protect our own pride as a country and say these people did us wrong, we need them to apologize? I was shocked to learn that in the British curriculum, in Kenya, we were colonized by the British, and among other African countries were colonized by the British. And I was shocked to learn, Kenya being a former colony of the British, that colonialism is not taught in the British curriculum. Instead, what they teach their people there, now you understand why, the black people are even treated the way they're treated today in the Western world. What they're saying or what they're teaching in their curriculum is that they came to Africa to bring civilization to Africa. So they did not come here to colonize us. And if you hear tales of the people who went through those days of colonialism, even in Kenya today, there was nothing. As much as they brought us the Bible, they brought us all of that, and a bit of colonization, but still we know the ancient colonization started from where? Egyptian colonization is one of the ancient colonization. So you can't really say Africa was so uncolonized. It's only that we were still in our culture, and that is what we embraced. And so what they brought us is just the Western culture that we have adopted very well, and now we call that colonization. So colonization, you cannot find that anywhere in the British curriculum. They don't teach their children there. They don't teach it there, and that's why they're out of touch with what really is happening across the world. And so, if you go tell them, no, we did not go to colonize them. We went there to civilize them. And so, this white generation are looking at other, even black people there. They're thinking, yeah, and that's why we came to civilize you, because you come from places where are uncivilized, and you see the attitude. And that's why now half of the US is up in flames. People are protesting, and this has attracted protests across the globe because enough is enough. The things that they're taught in their curriculums does not really capture the depth of what their interest when they're coming here to search for their interest and to colonize. It's not captured in the kind of education they teach in their schools there. So this generation, they don't understand. And so if you're told we went there to civilize them, so when you see them in your country, when you see a black American in America whose forefathers was put in a ship by force and taken there, you sit there thinking, you know what? Yeah, I'm better. They tend to have this superior, way of imagining that they think better or they do things better, because after all, the white people went to Africa to take to them civilization. So you cannot be that civilized. I think that must be the mentality. And that's why we're seeing the blacks out there saying, you know what, enough is enough. So for Tunisia's parliament to refuse voting for France to apologize, that's very interesting. Let me know what you think. I find that to be very interesting. Niall Gatcourt Achung, you're watching from Accra. Uchenna Augustine, you're saying 205 killed in the northern Nigeria. And I just read that. Okay, thank you for the update, because you seem to be giving me a different figure than I heard here. So the attack happened. The death toll has gone up, and about how many soldiers there have died. A good number of soldiers there have died. And this is from, an attack by Boko Haram. I remember early in the year when Senate there in Nigeria met, and they were debating on this bill and how to deal with Boko Haram, and they were demanding, for a response from the government. And what really amazed me is the fact that Boko Haram has been on the rise. Boko Haram has been very active. So it is just, I think in February, in February, yes, earlier this year, when the Senate in Nigeria said, okay, so we see here we have a problem. Boko Haram has become a problem. Boko Haram has become a thorn in the flesh of Nigeria, and the insecurity has become rampant, and now we need to do something about it. Just this year, in February, forget about what has been happening, because we've been reporting here the chaos and the maiming and the killings that have been happening through Boko Haram in Nigeria and other countries like Niger, like Chad, like Cameroon. They've also been affected by the activities of Boko Haram in that region. Right. And so in February, that is when Senate in Nigeria decided, now this has gone out of hand. If you ask me, Boko Haram has been out of hand for the last over 5 years. I mean, when it was supposed to be dealt with. So over time, you know, it has been continuing to gain strength and stride across the continent. And President Buhari, who promised to deal with Boko Haram after he came to power, has done very little to curtail the activities of Boko Haram there in Nigeria. So now, in February, that is when the Senate said, now demanded for the security officers there in Nigeria, for the office of the president to come and tell them what is happening and to take charge and all of that. And earlier before that, President Buhari had come out and said, I thought we had gotten rid of Boko Haram. His exact words were, we had technically defeated Boko Haram. I don't know, technically defeated. I don't know in this context what he even meant by that. But according to him, Boko Haram was not a threat to Nigeria at all. And that's why he maybe just sat pretty and pretended that nothing really was happening there in Nigeria in terms of the insecurity that has been caused by Boko Haram. So now, some of the solutions the senators there in Nigeria were suggesting, which I found to be absolutely utterly ridiculous. So one of the suggestions there as a solution is to get the repentant, as they call them, the repentant Boko Haram former fighters, and take them to studies abroad. So that will help them. Statistics show that that part of Nigeria, the northern part, they're not well educated. They don't value education very much because, so they come from a place of ignorance, And so one of the senators there came out and said, so one of the solutions of curbing the spread of Boko Haram is bringing in the repentance, the people, the former fighters there, and taking them to schools abroad, while Nigeria has bright minds, young people who come from backgrounds that require help, and you will not help these young people and give them the opportunity to go study abroad and to improve their lives and their society. But you want to take Boko Haram and give them an opportunity to go study abroad. And that is kind of thinking that, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. So they were not able to find a solution. I think the bill is, I don't know if it's still in Parliament or it was in Senate, or it was able to be passed there in Nigeria. And also, I think they were saying, they were suggesting for the Nigerian government to recruit more soldiers, especially from that area. And I remember one of the senators coming there and saying, and half of the recruits should come from my state. And you see, this is purely because insecurity is a national matter. So I don't even care who is there. I don't care what language the soldier speaks, as long as you bring people who are competent, who are ready and willing to do the job, and most importantly, who are patriotic, because you require that, And so now see, and that's why Boko Haram has really increased there. So you see the kind of mayhem it's causing there in Nigeria, and with this level of deaths, you will expect that this is something that will require President Buhari to come out and issue a press conference, because this, but when you're with the army of a country is killed, man, this touches on the national security on the country. So you would expect the president to come out and address this matter. I haven't seen this yet, and you're saying that 81 killed in Buhari state in Nigeria, and that is the northern part of Nigeria. So, very sad news there. And the death toll, of course, continues to increase there from a suspected Islamist jihadist there in the northern Nigeria. All right. And so we see there in Sudan, police have fired tear gas to disperse demonstrators. That happened yesterday in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, protesting against a new United Nations mission for the country. Now, the protesters who gathered near army headquarters accused the government of bringing in occupiers. So here's the thing. You know, we talked about Sudan yesterday. And we talked about that former Janjaweed army that presented himself to the ICC in the Central African Republic, right, to be charged. So now here's the thing. The Sudan's government, and I'm assuming it is the civilian side, had requested for an extension of the United Nations mission in South Sudan there to still help the country as the country even tries to transition. The transitional government has about 3 years period to organize and to bring in a new constitution so that after 3 years, Sudan can go into a proper democratic election that has not happened in that country for the last 30 years since President Omar al-Bashir was in power. And, you know, he was ousted last year. So now the Sudan's government, and as I say, I'm assuming the civilian side, said the time for the current United Nations mission in this country is ending. We are requesting and for an extension. And so the UN extended the mandate of this. So now when you see demonstrators in the streets of Khartoum demonstrating, and they're calling this UN army or brigade foreigners and occupiers, and they're saying they should leave. And so last week the UN Security Council approved the Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, whose mandate is to support the country's passage to civilian rule. And because they had requested for that, what I'm assuming is the army side had not agreed, is not happy with the extension of the United Nations mission there in Sudan. A reason being, a lot of these, they are from the United Nations, so they are from, a lot of them from the Western world coming into into Sudan, and the army, as we know, they had been requesting and wanting for the country to have Sharia law, and so with their presence there to try to neutralize the United Nations missions there, they're not very happy because they wanted them to go so that Sudan could go back to business as usual, go back to the military state it was. But I think the UN army there is there, of course, as an eye for the Western world and to advance, of course, their own interest and all that. Of course, the United Nations army, we are told they're neutral and all that, but hey, they're from that other side, okay? So, of course, they will be coming with a different mandate, and maybe the military side of the Sudan's transition government is not agreeing to this because they needed these people to leave. So now when you see protesters out in the streets protesting against the United Nations, mission there in Sudan, you wonder who is behind this, because we know the military side of Sudan was backed by the UAE, was backed by Saudi Arabia, was backed by Egypt, all that, the Arab League backed, the military there in Sudan. And so the protester side, who do not want the Sharia law as the military side wanted it, they want a liberal constitution. Right now they're working on their constitution. Sudan's constitution was suspended last year. They don't have a working constitution right now. And so that's why it is important. This 3-year transition period is very important and will mark a new dawn for Sudan should they get things right, And so it's a lot of politics and a lot of interest. And so when you see now civilians coming to the street and saying these people must go, who is asking them to do that? Who is funding this? The story of Sudan is just, it weighs, and we can talk about it until, days to come, but that is the situation right now. And Sudan is in a 3-year transition period with power shared between civilians and the military following the ousting last year of the long-serving President Omar al-Bashir. So I think that is the latest. And this news from South Sudan about the country slightly improving as the least peaceful country in the world after coming fourth in the Global Peace Index, fourth from down. So the report released yesterday ranked South Sudan's state of peace in the very low category. And this is after Afghanistan, which remains the least peaceful country in the world, a position it has held for the last 2 years, followed by Syria, Iraq, and South Sudan. And it is a sad thing. But I don't know if you agree with this report, this Global Peace Index, for the viewers who are watching me there from South Sudan. Do you agree with this report here that Sudan is rates amongst the least peaceful countries in the world? And as I said there, I'll go check where Kenya is ranking. All right. So thank you so much for watching. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. Let's meet here again tomorrow. The same time, we get to talk more about Africa. My name is Miriam Mugutu. A very good afternoon to you.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.